One day, the people of Quraysh asked Prophet Muhammad to answer some questions to test the authenticity of his prophethood.
Tell us about the mighty traveler who reached the confines of both East and West.
Prophet Muhammad answered it in Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, verse 83 to 102.
They will ask thee of Zulkarnin. Say, I shall recite unto you a remembrance of him. Lo, we made him strong in the land and gave him unto everything a road.
After he said the entire verses, the people of Quraysh did not believe in the authenticity of his answer. In Quran, Surah Al-An'am, verse 25, they said,
This is naught else than fables of the men of old.
So, according to the Quraysh, Muhammad's answer about the mighty traveler is nothing but a fable or a myth. Is that really true? How did they know about it? To find the answer, first, we have to know who is Dhul Qarnayn. For centuries, most Muslim historians and Quranic commentators endorsed the identity of Dhul Qarnayn as Alexander the Great, a king from Macedonia. For instance, Ibn Ishaq said in Sirat Rasul Allah, a man who used to purvey stories of the foreigners, which were handed down among them, told me that Dhul Qarnayn was an Egyptian whose name was Marzaban bin Mardaba, the Greek. Jalalain Tafsir also says that Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great. And they the Jews question you concerning Dhul Qarnayn whose name was Alexander, he was not a prophet. The well-known Quran translator Abdullah Yusuf Ali had the same belief. Personally, I have not the least doubt that Zulkarnin is meant to be Alexander the Great, the historic Alexander, and not the legendary Alexander. Alexander the Great conquered the eastern Mediterranean, Egypt, the Middle East, and parts of Asia in a remarkably short period of time. Many people admired him and wrote fables about him. Callisthenes of Olynthus, who was Alexander's court historian, wrote several manuscripts of novelistic biography of Alexander the Great in 334 BCE. His text was known as the Alexander Romance and it was spread throughout the Middle East since 4 CE, and translated in various languages such as Syriac, Hebrew, Persian, Arabic. The Syriac version of Alexander Romance was published in the early 6th CE, and had been widely known among the Middle Eastern societies in the 7th century CE, during Prophet Muhammad's era. Historian Ernest Wallace Budge translated the Syrian text in English, and the book is titled The History of Alexander the Great, being the Syriac version of the Pseudo-Callisthenes. From this book we learn that Surah Al-Kahf verse 83 to 102 was actually taken directly from the Syriac version of Alexander Romance. Let's see the striking similarities. 1. 2 horns. Coins depicting Alexander with ram horns on his head were first minted shortly after his death. By the 1st century BC, silver coins depicting Alexander with ram horns were used as the primary currency in Arabia. Imitation coins were used in the Arabian Peninsula for another 1,000 years. This connection of Alexander with 2 horns was widely known across the region at the time.
O God, Lord of kings and judges, thou who settest up kings and destroyest their power, I know in my mind that thou hast exalted me above all kings, and thou hast made me horns upon my head, wherewith I might thrust down the kingdoms of the world.
In Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, Dhul Qarnayn means the one with 2 horns. 2. Establish with power. At the beginning of the Syriac legend, Alexander says a prayer to God that he might be given power from heaven to rule over the kingdoms of the earth.
Give me power from thy holy heavens that I may receive strength greater than that of the kingdoms of the world and that I may humble them, and I will magnify thy name, O Lord, forever.
The Quranic story, speaking from the perspective of Allah, says that he has given Alexander power on earth. 3. Journey to the fetid sea. The first journey of Alexander was the place near the setting of the sun, known as Oceanus, a mythical sea believed to encircle a flat earth. As to the thing, my Lord, which thy majesty or thy greatness desires to go and see, namely, upon what the heavens rest, and what surrounds the earth, the terrible seas which surround the world will not give thee a passage, because there are 11 bright seas. And beyond these there is about 10 miles of dry land, and beyond these 10 miles there is the fetid sea, Oceanus the ocean, which surrounds all creation. The Syriac legend mentions that the water is fetid, and the Syriac word is saria, while Quran says the water is murky, and the Arab word is hamiyeh. Both saria and hamiyeh are synonym. This similarity is mentioned in Sirat Rasul Allah, page 12, in which Ibn Ishaq quoted a poem that says the pool of mud and fetid slime. 4. Punishment of wrongdoers. The Syriac legend explains that Alexander asked for criminals to be sent to the shore of the fetid sea to test a rumor that anyone who approaches the sea dies. And Alexander and his troops encamped, and he sent and called to him the governor who was in the camp, and said to him,
Are there any men here guilty of death?
We have 37 men in bonds who are guilty of death.
Bring hither those evil doers.
And they brought them, and the king commanded them and said,
Go ye to the shore of the fetid sea, and hammer in stakes that ships may be tied thereto, and prepare everything needful for a force about to cross the sea.
And the men went, and came to the shore of the sea. Now Alexander thought within himself,
If it be true as they say, that everyone who comes near the fetid sea dies, it is better that these who are guilty of death should die.
And when they had gone, and had arrived at the shore of the sea, they died instantly. The Quranic story only gives the reader a cryptic speech by Dhul Qarnayn where he says that whoever does wrong will be sent back to the Lord or killed, without telling the whole event. Not only is there a direct parallel between the stories, but the Syriac legend helps make sense of the short and cryptic Quranic version of the story. 5. Sun rises on people with no cover. After leaving the muddy water, Alexander met the people who live near the location where the sun enters the window of heaven, which rises above the flat earth, and they must seek cover, because the sun is much closer to the ground, and its rays burn the people and animals there. So the whole camp mounted, and Alexander and his troops went up between the fetid sea and the bright sea, to the place where the sun enters the window of heaven. For the sun is the servant of the Lord, and neither by night nor by day does he cease from his traveling. The place of his rising is over the sea, and the people who dwell there, when he is about to rise, flee away and hide themselves in the sea, that they be not burnt by his rays, and he passes through the midst of the heavens to the place where he enters the window of heaven. And wherever he passes there are terrible mountains, and those who dwell there have caves hollowed out in the rocks, and as soon as they see the sun passing over them, men and birds flee away from before him and hide in the caves. For rocks are rent by his blazing heat and fall down, and whether they be men or beasts, as soon as the stones touch them they are consumed. The Quran informs similar message, although provides no reason why people have no covering protection against the sun. 6. Gog and Magog spoil and ravage the land. The Syriac legend then states that Alexander meets with people who live near the mountain pass. These natives tell of a tribe, the Huns, who spoils and ravage the land and then return back to their lands on the other side of the mountain. The legend identifies the first two kings of this tribe as Gog and Magog, the exact same names used in the Quranic account. Alexander said,
This mountain is higher and more terrible than all the mountains which I have seen.
Yea, by your majesty, my lord the king, neither we nor our fathers have been able to march one step in it, and men do not ascend it either on that side or on this, for it is the boundary which God has set between us and the nations within it.
Who are the nations within this mountain upon which we are looking?
They are the Huns.
Who are their kings?
Gog and Magog.
Have they come forth to spoil in your days?
May God establish thy kingdom and thy crown, my lord the king. These fortresses which have been overturned in our lands and in the lands of the Romans, have been overthrown by them, By them have these towers been uprooted. When they go forth to spoil, they ravage the land of the Romans and of the Persians, and then they enter their own territory.
Quran says the same information without the details of the story. Seven. Build a barrier. After speaking with the people about Gog and Magog, Alexander says he will build a barrier, such as a wall or a dam, between the people and the tribes that harass them. The king said,
Do ye desire that we should do something wonderful in this land?
They said to him,
As thy majesty commands, we will do.
Let us make a gate of brass and close up this breach.
Both the Quran and the Syriac legend record Alexander proclaiming the same message in a speech. 8. Made of iron and brass. Another similarity between the two stories is that the wall will be made of both iron and brass. And Alexander commanded and fetched 3,000 smiths, workers in iron, and 3,000 men, workers in brass, and they put down brass and iron, and kneaded it as a man kneads when he works clay. Then they brought it and made a gate, the length of which was 12 cubits and its breadth 8 cubits. And he made a lower threshold from mountain to mountain, the length of which was 12 cubits. Here the Quranic translators use different words for the second metal: lead, Yusuf Ali, copper, picthol, brass, shakir, but the connection with the Syriac legend is apparent. 9. Cannot be breached. After constructing the barrier, the Syriac legend says that it is very difficult to penetrate and the Huns will not be able to dig under it. He fixed the gate and the bolts, and he placed nails of iron and beat them down one by the other, so that if the Huns came and dug out the rock which was under the threshold of iron, even if footmen were able to pass through, a horse with its rider would be unable to pass, so long as the gate that was hammered down with bolts stood. A similar phrase is used in the Quran to convey that the barrier is very difficult to pass. 10. Destroyed at the end of times. The Syriac legend ends the story with a prophetic prediction of the wall being destroyed and the tribes of Gog and Magog surging and destroying everything in their path. This event will occur when the nations have been gathered together at the end of times. And the Lord will gather together the kings and their hosts which are within this mountain, and they shall all be assembled at his beck, and shall come with their spears and swords, and shall stand behind the gate, and shall look up to the heavens, and shall call upon the name of the Lord, saying,
O Lord, open to us this gate.
And the Lord shall send his sign from heaven, and a voice shall call on this gate, and it shall be destroyed and fall at the beck of the Lord, and it shall not be opened by the key which I have made for it. And a troop shall go through this gate which I have made, and a full span shall be worn away from the lower threshold, by the hoofs of the horses which with their riders shall go forth to destroy the land by the command of the Lord. The Quran also ends the story with a similar prophecy. Van Bladel in his essay titled The Alexander Legend in the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, verse 83 to 102, sums up the relation between the Quran and the Syriac legend. Thus, quite strikingly, almost every element of this short Quranic tale finds a more explicit and detailed counterpart in the Syriac Alexander legend. In both texts the related events are given in precisely the same order. As it is, the correspondences shown earlier are still so exact that it is obvious in comparison that the two texts are at least connected very closely. They relate the same story in precisely the same order of events using many of the same particular details. The Syriac legend was published in the early 6th CE and based on the Alexander romance by Pseudo-Callisthenes that was written in 334 BC. Quran was written and compiled in the late 7th CE. This proves beyond any doubt that the Syriac legend is a direct source for the Dhul Qarnayn story. In Quran, Surah Yusuf, verse 2, and Surah Ar-Ra'd verse 37, also Surah Fussilat, verse 41, Allah said that He Himself wrote the Quran in heaven. But that claim is incorrect since Surah Al-Kahf, verses 83 to 102 was clearly based on an ancient manuscript, written by Callisthenes, a pagan writer who did not recognize Allah or Islam. Another problem is that Alexander the Great was not a Muslim. He was a pagan king who believed that he was the son of Zeus Ammon, which was a combination between Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, and Ammon, the king of the Egyptian gods. Because of this reason, most modern Muslim scholars reject the idea that Dhul Qarnayn is Alexander the Great. The most prominent alternative theory is that Dhul Qarnayn was Cyrus the Great of Persia. Supporters of the Cyrus theory claim he followed Zoroastrianism, which they also claim is monotheistic. However, the Encyclopedia Iranica in its online article on Cyrus, in a section on his religious policies, notes the following. In a temple in Uruk he called himself caretaker of the temples of Esagila and Ezida, respectively the sanctuaries of Marduk in Babylon and Nabu in Borsippa. On the Cyrus cylinder he claimed that the god Marduk had ordered him to become ruler of the whole world and to treat the Babylonians with justice. The translation of the Cyrus cylinder of the British Museum shows that King Cyrus worshipped Marduk, who was a pagan god from ancient Mesopotamia and patron deity of the city of Babylon. King Cyrus was not known to have two horns. There was no story about King Cyrus went to the place of rising sun, or had anything to do with Gog and Magog, or ever built metal wall between mountains. When we compare this to the legendary version of Alexander, we have complete evidence that the legendary Alexander is the person identified as Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran and not Cyrus. The story of Dhul Qarnayn in the Quran is taken from the Syriac version of Alexander romance. This causes some theological consequences that are difficult to explain. For instance, who exactly is Dhul Qarnayn if he isn't Alexander the Great or King Cyrus? Where is the fetid sea that he visited to see the sunrise? Where is the giant metal wall that he built? Where are the people of Gog and Magog nowadays? It may be easier to answer all of these questions if one understands that the story is just a myth of ancient society, just like what the Quraysh said in Quran, Surah Al-An'am, verse 25.
This is nothing else than fables of the ancient people.